live. 1 second. There we are. Okay, give me a minute. Okay, so as always, I feel incredibly privileged. I'm telling you, like, I know we have focused on women in the last 4.5 years, and I'm so grateful. And I'm going to continue focusing on women in a much bigger way, as I will share within the next few months with the group. But and it always astounds me how, like, the amount of diamonds that are within our nation is just always moves me to, like, every time I look at another bio, I'm like, whoa, like, I'm just like so moved. I can't even begin to tell you. Like, it's just like, it just gives you such a love and appreciation of who we are as a people and the women of this generation. It's just amazing. And the men, of course, the men too. Okay, so I feel very, very privileged. Sofiya Sara Ester Tamarkin is a writer for Chabad.org, H.com, and the Times of Israel. She draws inspiration from the journeys of people seeking meaning in their Jewish heritage. Born in the former Soviet Union, Sofiya discovered she was Jewish at the age of 10. After immigrating to the United States in 1989, she received a blessing from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, embarked on a journey rediscovering her Jewish identity. Her unconventional journey included lessons from missionaries, learning to light Shabbos candles from Barbara Strasser's movie Yentl, and gaining profound wisdom during an encounter with President Mikhail Gorbachev. Her life is a proof that light can be found in the most unlikely places. Sofiya holds an MBA degree and manages an orthopedic company. She is a yoga teacher and a certified life coach. Mrs. Tamarkin is the author of 3 Jewish children's books in Russian. She's a storyteller who participates in national storytelling events. Having traveled to 90 countries, Sofiya learns from diverse life experiences of people she meets. Sofiya's mission is to collect sparks and to celebrate our communal Jewish identity. Destiny, sorry. Sofiya, wow. I have to ask you a quick question. I know that was your family part of the refuseniks in Russia?
We are
Sofiya?
the product. We are the product of the refusenik movement, and we were the first family to leave from our city called Saratov because of all the hard work that refuseniks did. So we are the result of their hard work.
So I have to tell you something very, very interesting. I have to share with you that I had a brother who was very, very big in the entertainment industry, and he was the first one. He went in 1986 or 1987. He entered into Russia. I really don't want to give too much information, but he entered in Russia under the guise of something else, and he was on a trip with the State Department, and they made a Pesach Seder for the refuseniks under the State Department. I just have to tell you this. And what he did was he filmed, he went in with somebody else, with an organization. He filmed all the different goings on all over the United States of the demonstrations, et cetera, that was going on. But he was the first to bring out all the actual video footage documentation of the lives of the refuseniks. And interestingly enough, he had to do this. They had to do this in a secret way. It was then given over to a senator in the American government, and they were followed. They were put into one hotel after another. But he secretly, this was the first time that any documentation, that actual documentation of refuseniks speaking on camera came out into the public eye.
We want to hear her, not you.
So it's really quite amazing, actually. So that's why it fascinates me. Even if you can address for 2 seconds what it was like as a child living as a refusenik in Russia. If you wouldn't mind, just for 2 minutes.
Of course.
Sofiya?
I'm so honored and privileged and humbled to be here amongst the greats of the Jewish people to begin my day pretty early on Thanksgiving with the hearing prayers. It's a song to my soul. I did grow up in a very dark place of the former Soviet Union. This was a place, for those that don't understand, where in 1917, there was a revolution and the new movement of communists and government officials brought atheism as an official mentality and, so to speak, religion. So there was a class on atheism in a school and in universities where people had to literally, prove that there is no God. And there was a grade on that, just like in math and biology. So if you did not pass that class, as you can imagine, you don't graduate. So this went on for over 70 years. So for those that think about generational trauma, my grandmother, who just a few years passed away in America at the age of 95, was born after revolution in 1924. So her life was complete assimilation because already in her childhood, there was absolutely no introduction of any kind of spirituality or religious fundamental beliefs, not only for Jews, but for any religious group. So unfortunately, since she had absolutely no knowledge, she could not pass on any Jewish identity, any Jewish traditions to my mother. This is my maternal grandmother. And obviously my mother knew absolutely nothing, like less than you can imagine. And by the time I was born in 1976, we were, very integrated in a society. Yet, despite the fact that we had zero knowledge or understanding about who we are, there was still a few things left, even though it was probably not even according to a Jewish calendar. But my parents fasted on Yom Kippur. And they probably had a calendar way before revolution. So they fasted on the last day they knew when the Yom Kippur was, which could have been 70 years prior. But they wanted to be part of something bigger. Without understanding, their soul was searching for connection. And on the holiday of Passover, most Jews in the former Soviet Union would go to one house or underground bakery where they would get a little piece of matzah baked in a somewhat kosher way. And that piece of bread was like the last connection to the Jewish people. We never thought we'd get out. We never thought we'd see anything of what we're seeing today, where, I'm in Philadelphia listening to the song of Jewish women all over the world. It was a pretty hopeless situation. 70 years is a very long time. It's generations. So I did have a piece of matzah in my childhood, a very tiny one. Every family got a very tiny piece. I did have to take class on atheism. I did have to try to be like all the other Soviet girls wearing uniforms and singing songs of communism and socialism and trying to fit in as children want to. But despite the fact that we knew nothing, our neighbors and the overall society knew that we were Jews. And with every opportunity, they made sure to remind us that we don't belong, that we are different. They don't like us. We need to get out. As you know, Soviet Union was sealed from all sides. There was absolutely nowhere to go. There was no way to get out. So this is how the refusenik movement was formed. I was a young girl of 12, so I couldn't really participate. I was born later in this movement. But my gratitude and my emotions are so overwhelming right now for the feelings I have towards your brother and people like him, for all that was done, risking their own lives and their own comfort zone in Western world, because we mattered. And we didn't know that. It would have given us a lot of hope, but we obviously didn't know that and cared about us. So we lived in a very strange place where we really did not fit in. We had no place amongst that society, and they made sure that we know about that. But yet we had no knowledge or opportunity to live out our Jewish destiny. So it was a very unhealthy and very dark place. And I do want to point out that when I did come out and immigrate to the United States, someone told me that they personally had a chair empty for people like myself, for the Jews of the Soviet Union that were in an emotional and physical captivity. And I say the word captivity very mindfully. And when I found out that the chair was empty, when I realized that the chair was there for me, all I needed to do is just pray for a miracle and eventually arrive. I felt incredible feeling of belonging and unity amongst the Jewish people because someone cared to put a chair, even though it could be decades before I would come. When I say obviously, I represent Jewish people that were held in the captivity of the darkness of the former Soviet Union. So I thank your brother, and I thank all those that fought for us.
I mean, I want to ask you one more question before you go on. I hope
Sure.
I'm not disturbing
That's
anyone.
all right.
It's so unbelievably fascinating. So when you ate this piece of matzah, Sofiya, was there any explanation? Did anybody even understand what that piece of matzah was? Was there any form, like even when, like, it's so interesting what you say, like on some level, you know, the Upter Rebbe would have said, like, the fact that they kept a calendar, even though they fasted on a day that might have been a day from 70 years ago, the fact that they even had that consciousness to do that is so remarkable.
Right.
What was an explanation? Was there, because there was no ability to have any knowledge of Judaism.
Absolutely no ability. And it was very dangerous. And if you were caught trying to read a literature that was smuggled in by holy people like your brother, you know, years before, and this did happen in, you know, 60s, but very limited, very, very limited. So whatever knowledge was passed on from generation to generation was very, very limited. Whatever literature was there was almost none. And happens to be that people still yearned to connect to their Jewish identity. It's mind-blowing. You're right. And I just want to tell you the way this worked, that the night of Pesach, which was probably not the night of Pesach, to be fair, to be honest, but we thought it was the night of Pesach based on whatever calendar, or maybe it was. It's hard to say, really. And my parents would go somewhere and they'd come back in the middle of the night. They stood in some secret line. And they came back with a pillowcase. Now, interestingly enough, most of my friends that are now living in the United States or Israel are about my age, and they have the same experience. Their parents would go in the middle of the night and come back with a pillowcase. So finally, we try to understand why pillowcase, right? This is a strange thing. So pillowcase is also a traditional thing that somehow seeped in through generations because pillowcase had no chometz in it. We had limited bags. So pillowcase is, kind of clean, definitely clean garment. And you would put a piece of matzah in that pillowcase. And the piece of matzah could be as big as a palm. So you understand it's not the entire piece. Maybe, a few pieces were baked and they were split apart amongst like 100 or 300 families. So this was a little piece. And I remember about age 11 or so, it's hard to remember exactly when, I woke up, I heard my parents in the kitchen and they were whispering. And I came out, and I came to the kitchen in my nightgown and I said, what's going on? As children are very curious. And my father really trusted me. We have a very deep bond. And he told me, and it's fine, it sounds really outrageous, I think. He says, we belong to some very special people. And I perked up. I said, great, what does this mean? He says, well, we eat very special bread because we came out of Egypt. Now, you understand, right? If you were to say this today, perhaps to a child, that we fell from Mars, they'd probably be less surprised with all the technology. So I was never in Egypt, that's for sure. And we definitely did not come out of Egypt as a family. But at this point, things were so strange and mind-blowing. It was easier to accept than to fight off this knowledge. And he said to me that there was special food we ate along the way. And I'm going to let you try a really tiny piece because we only had a little piece. And you can never, ever tell this to any of your friends because it's very dangerous. So you're ready for this risk. And, you can imagine I thought it would be some kind of chocolate or something very fancy. And he says, close your eyes. I'm going to put it in your mouth. And I closed my eyes, put a tiny piece of matzah in my mouth, maybe an inch by an inch. And I was now really confused because, as you know, the whole purpose of the matzah is it's very plain and humble. And well, we were already very plain and humble, and I didn't quite understand what was happening. And I said, "Can I look at it?" And Dad, I remember that he took another piece from the pillowcase and let me look at it. And I thought it looked like a thick cardboard. And I thought our family came out of Egypt, not sure when exactly, maybe when I was sleeping, and we are eating cardboards as we're doing that. So this was pretty much my impression. And this was a huge secret. I was reminded numerous times not to tell anyone, because kids were tested in school, given to look at Jewish objects. And if they knew what they were, the whole family might go on vacation for the entire lifetime in Siberia. So it was very brave and bold of my parents to let me look at it and taste it. But that was probably one of my first Jewish experiences.
I have another question. I'm sorry. So the people, it's just amazing, Sofiya. Like we take so much for granted. And we don't even, and there's so, when you look at the history of the Jewish people, we have people here from Iran on this call who've also literally had to fight, their families fight for survival to get out of Iran. You look at some of the history of the Jewish people, it's just, even in think about it, in the 21st century, it's an unbelievable concept. It's almost like you talk about coming out of Egypt, you came out of Egypt. Right? You were a symbol of coming out of Egypt, mamash.
Mamash, true.
Yeah. And what's interesting, my question to you also is, the people who did the Mesiras Nefesh to make that matzah, there was people that had that knowledge, Sofiya, within the Soviet Union. There was people that had that knowledge that were able to do these types of things, because that matzah had to be made, or it had to be smuggled into Russia, right, from somewhere else.
So I don't know exactly who made that matzah, but it happens to be that in every city there was this type of experience. Most of my friends, and they're from all over from the former Soviet Union. They're from all over the Soviet Union. So this is not an individual experience. My experiences are the same as for the entire Soviet Union. So I don't know if people have any idea what Soviet Union was like, but I just want to point out how we lived. We were literally zombied into our reality. We were like robots. Everybody had the same uniform to wear in school. Outside of school, there were just a few factories that made clothes. So there were maybe, 10 dresses, 10 different pants and 5 different, shirts for men. So if you take a pool of, statistical pool of 1,000 people, every 20th person would be dressed the same, because there were only a limited number of people that made garments. Then clothes, same with furniture. If you look at pictures, it's mind-blowing. If you take a picture of my childhood, my husband's childhood, who lived in Belarus, and I lived in Russia. It's another republic. Many of my friends from all different republics, our houses look the same. There were maybe 10 couches made for the entire Soviet Union. So either you had it, or your aunt, or your grandmother. Our lives were exactly the same. We were zombied into thinking the same. We look the same. That's how it starts, right? We dress everyone the same. We had the same. There's a movie that everybody watched during New Year's celebration, December 31st. It was like a classic. The entire country watched the movie. When someone got drunk, got on the plane by mistake, ended up in another city, and said his address, because every city had, streets that were named after communist leaders, such as Marx, Lenin, right, Stalin, all those leaders that were worshipped as we worship. I don't want to compare, but as religious people worship and pray and connect. That's what happened. They substituted this yearning for truth with something very fake, like a child, instead of milk and nourishment, is sucking on a pacifier, with emptiness, with nothing. And eventually the child just throws it out. They don't want it anymore, right? We all witnessed that as mothers, those that did. but there's nothing else. So you put it back in a baby's mouth and it's still sucking because there's no nourishment coming. That was us. This was a visual of our reality. So that movie is that the person not only ended up in the apartment that looked identical, he only mentioned that the sofa is in the wrong place because that's the reality. We all had the same furniture. And he opened the key, the lock with the key that he had from another city, because there were maybe another 20 factories that made locks. So eventually you could open anyone's house if you had 20 keys from, all your relatives. This was mind blowing. We were zombied. It was, when we came to America and we saw movies of what it's like when, like everyone is zombie and they think we were that. We were living in that reality. So how did people know? It's hard to imagine. I mean, my great grandfather, my father's grandfather, who died in 1960s. So that's already 30 years after revolution. No, I'm sorry, even 40 years after revolution. He kept on the mitzvot, but he would never tell anything about what he did to his children, which would be my paternal grandmother. So she just found out, she saw her father acting really strange. And one of the things he did is he would take off part of the roof during a week in the fall, and he would sit on everybody's way. And there were weird leaves on top, and everybody would mock him, but he could never say a word, because if they knew, then be asked in school, this would be real trouble. So my father saw this weird thing and weird behavior, but what are you going to do? He doesn't explain. He just sits there for a week, and then eventually he folds the chair, folds the little table, and moves out. So can you imagine what it was like for my father, 60 years later, from the time he saw it as a child, to come to my house, and my husband explained that, Sukkah is when you put leaves and the rain has to be able to come in. And we remember that we're under Hashem's providence. And my father just burst out crying, because he finally understood that his deity wasn't just losing his mind, but he was fulfilling a very important commandment for a holiday of Sukkot, right? And we're all laughing. We're like, oh, of course, well, it's clear. But this is what happened. So perhaps the Zaidi was the one baking such matzahs, as an example, for the entire whoever he could reach. He also, that particular Zaidi of mine was a moil, so he made Brit for Jewish people, those that wanted. My father had a Brit on day 8, which is unheard of in 1940s. And he would come, that Zaidi would come to a city and say, whoever want their child circumcised, and this child could be, a year old or 6 months old, or who knows, maybe 3 days old. He's not coming back anytime soon. So once the child is circumcised, the family that said yes, this is not a one-time occurrence, 1 week occurrence. This child is going to live out a life that is unimaginably difficult. I don't think you and I can even understand what it's like, because, we could understand stand up for Shabbat or Kashrut when maybe outside of your comfort zone. But, there was no privacy in the Soviet Union. Everything belonged to communal society. So there was no changing room. So when you're in school and a boy is changing, everybody sees that he's circumcised, and the mocking and the intolerance for public display of any kind of religious command, which is the most important for a male, as we know. So that Zaidi did what he could. Maybe he theoretically taught, someone else that was willing to live this type of life of sacrifice. So for every city, there were a few elders, as they were called. Elders, maybe there were young people, very unlikely. I don't know. For every city, I don't know exactly. But I know there were literally a few people in every city that lived underground life of holiness. There was Chabad that tried to do underground work. Maybe something was smuggled in, very limited, very difficult, as you're saying, in 1986. And we're talking about, 50s, 60s, almost impossible. But somehow people connected and tried their best to hold on to their heritage. And I think worth mentioning that every Jewish parent, knowing nothing except intolerance, anti-Semitism, and pain, told their children to marry Jewish. And this to me is literally, this is just Hashem's gift, because wouldn't you think the child would be told, marry out, try to fit in even more? Like, this life is intolerable. My parents, my husband's parents, and thousands of other parents that came out as adults told their children, marry Jewish. The rate of assimilation was very low, much, much lower than now. It's unthinkable. So Jewish people, despite everything, came out as Jewish people. I mean, of course, there was certain percent of assimilation. I'm not sure exactly how much, but most people I know are married to Jews in that environment. And the goal was almost like Hasidic wedding today. You know, a Jewish grandfather would meet another Jewish grandfather. So you have a daughter, I have a son. Let them go on a date. And they're our clan, they're our type, they're our people. What that entails, no one knew. But we are one, we're family. Like this, we are eternally connected. Jews would help Jews. Jews would know we stand together in this. And we were shun away from the main society, but boy, did we cling to each other. And that unity was, I guess that's what held us through.
You know what's very interesting, Sofiya, about what you're talking about is that there's so many things that you can look at society today or look at the concept of the Holocaust. You know, you talk about how boys who, it's very interesting because I had a girlfriend from the Soviet Union, and I remember that when she came to Canada, her son was, I think, 13 years old or something, and he hadn't been circumcised, and they had to circumcise him. They had to circumcise him at a very later age in his life. What's very, very interesting is that the response, you know, we as a people have always wondered, how is it that humanity goes along with evil or what has always been done to us? It's so interesting. Also, you look at a place like the Soviet Union, and the Jew again was targeted, right? It always seems to be the Jew that's targeted. But what's interesting also is that you look at the complicity, how easy it is for humanity to almost just, you know, I don't want to use the word evil, but just to align themselves with something that's no good, how easy it is to take the human mind and to twist it. You know, you saw that during the Holocaust. You saw that during all the pogroms against the Jews. You saw that in Russia, where you're talking about how it was a danger to even speak about even having the ability to take a piece of matzah, or a boy that was circumcised, how he would have to, what would be done to him because he was circumcised, you know. And you see it around the world today, you know, with the complicity of you know, people who are aligning themselves with the absolute evil. But what's interesting too that you say is that you talk about how there was this movement towards socialism, communism. Everybody was made to look the same. You were made to accept everybody's the same. You're seeing a lot, you've been watching that happen within the younger generation in America today. That must be extremely frightening for you as living through.
It is extremely frightening, because people that are aligning in themselves with that mentality are not aware. They're idealists. I'm sure they can explain their mindset, but I have been on the other side and I have seen what this leads to. And I know that this is a path to destruction and pain and frustration for everyone. They're moving towards the path that will destroy the entire society, including themselves, but they don't realize it, of course. So yes, it is very painful and frustrating for Russian Jews to watch that. Most Russian Jews.
Wow. So you've traveled around the world, and your whole idea is that bringing up sparks.
Yes. Since we talked about my background, and I actually was thinking, should I say a few things about my background or not? Turns out that Hashem has a plan, and when we did, and I do appreciate that I was able to share that, because it's hard to really understand where I'm coming from, because you know, people that have not experienced such darkness perhaps cannot imagine what light looks like. It's you know, if you're sitting in a room that has not a flicker of light for certain periods, you know, for a few decades of your life. For me specifically, it was almost 13 years. Eventually, when you see any kind of remnants of light, you get very excited, overwhelmed, and joyous. And today in America, for those of you that know, is Thanksgiving Day. And it is wonderful that the American society celebrates a day of Thanksgiving, a day of gratitude. But as I became more connected to my heritage, I was so overwhelmed by joy, knowing that the whole idea, the concept of Judaism comes from the word of Yehudi, which has the same root word as chadu, which is gratitude. We are the people that are grateful. We are the people that acknowledge God's gifts. We are the people that recognize sparks and don't take anything for granted. And one day is not enough for us. We begin our day with the word grateful am I. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was a chief rabbi of England, said that interesting. We don't say I am grateful, say grateful am I, right? If you translate, the first word is not I, it's the grateful. We are the people that are taught to be grateful. We say blessings on food, after food. We begin our day and we end our day with gratitude. We're mindful. We appreciate everything that we do have. And I think it's important to mention this today as American society sits and eats turkey. Not exactly sure why, but even though I do understand why, but this has a meaning. But to me, what does have a very particular meaning is that I get to do this every day. I get to begin my day with gratitude. And my mission in life is to appreciate people's journeys. I feel like most of us have been on very difficult paths, such as our journey in life, and we have been sent here to find our truth, to find and align our inner light with God's light through Torah and mitzvot. And then, as I see personally other people struggling and fighting for this truth, I get very inspired. And I travel the world because this is my passion, to meet people, to connect to people, to appreciate their journeys and to learn from their journeys. And I realized that, light can be found in such unlikely places. And since I feel like we don't have that much time, since we have had a privilege to pray, and then I shared some of my personal background story, I would like to tell you one of my latest and one of the most inspiring stories that I've encountered in my entire life. And I've encountered a lot. I write about them for those that are interested. They can look me up on Chabad, Sofiya, Tamarkin, or Aish, or Times of Israel. And Chabad has a collection of many, many stories from the former Soviet Union. I probably will eventually make it into a book, but it has many, many stories about growing up in that environment for those that are interested to learn more, as well as stories about people I meet along the way. And I would like to have an opportunity today to share with you a very special story that happened about two months ago. And it begins with the fact that during COVID, I have signed up for a life coaching class with Rabbi Niven. Maybe some of you have heard that name. He's a very famous and very profound life coach from Israel. And as you know, there are many people that either call in and or listen live. It's hard to really listen to recordings. It's hard to know who is who in amongst those classes. And in the beginning of COVID, my maternal aunt, who was very close to me, she did not have children. She was like my mother. She unfortunately contracted COVID and was very sick and was dying from COVID alone in a hospital room, as unfortunately many of our loved ones did. And I was really going through a difficult time. And in one of those classes where we talked about Emunah and Betachon, I shared that it's a lofty concept, but when you know someone that is so dear to you, and they're suffering alone, not only she was dying in complete isolation. I just couldn't work on that lofty concept. I was just crying. I was in too much pain, and it's very raw for me. And a few weeks later, I was very surprised to get an envelope with a card that said on the envelope that it's from your soul sister, meaning that I realized it's from someone from that group of women that heard my cry of my soul for a beloved relative who was suffering. And inside that envelope were 3D flowers, you know, those pop-up flowers. I could almost show it to you if you want, the red ones. And when I opened the envelope and got those 3D pop-up flowers, I felt incredibly touched by the kindness. I feel like it's worth it to, usually when I speak, I don't have it, but you could see they're like beautiful pop-up flowers. And when I opened it, I felt like, again, coming from the place of darkness and isolation, and you understand the culture of communism, there was no concept of empathy or individual pain or individuality. That all was smashed, right? You had to fit into the mold of a Soviet citizen. We sang the same songs, we dreamed the same dreams. At least they tried. I mean, probably they haven't succeeded fully, but almost. So, you know, to have this individual pain acknowledged, and for someone to take time to go and, you know, get my address and send those flowers in, felt very validating and empathetic. And I was just so grateful. So I put these flowers where they still stand, and forever will stand, next to my davening book where I pray. And prayers come very difficult. I mean, I learned them later in life. Everything is underlined. I don't speak Hebrew. I can understand a few hundred words, and the reading in Hebrew would take days if I was to read prayer in Hebrew. I'm very limited, and no matter how much I learn, how much I study, and how much I commit myself to this, you know, I don't know a single Jewish lullaby, because all my lullabies are Soviet songs, right? That's what my mother sang to me, and unfortunately, that's what I sang to my children, because that's the only song I know. I mean, my soul sings Jewish melody, but there's no words. So at some point, you know, there's only so much you can catch up on. So I have my Shabbat Ester underlined with my flowers next to it, and I'm doing my best in English, reading it, some things in Hebrew, some things in English, and I look at it every day. And there was no address. There was no name. There was an address, but there was no name. So I realized this person would never be discovered. There's just kind of unconditional gift. And years later, my husband and I like to travel, and this is how we spend our free time and our finances. We don't hoard our money. We like to spend them on gifts and to loved ones, on tzedakah, and on travel. So this was my 90th country. I'm so grateful for this number. I count my countries because I try to be grateful for everything. And we were on a ship that went to Greenland. This was an unusual destination, and I don't even know anyone really that went to Greenland. I must be honest with you. I tried to look to seek advice, but this was a ship that went to Greenland. And I pre-ordered kosher food because obviously at this point we keep kosher. It's probably not so obvious because most Russian Jews, just so you have compassion and understanding that after 70 years of complete loss of identity, it's very unlikely to suddenly get up and say, oh yes, let me, you know, turn this whole thing around, you know, 4 generations and start keeping kosher. If we keep Yom Kippur on the right date, that's already a progress. So for any Russian Jew that remained a Jew, it's a miracle. And I personally think that you can get brachas from people like that. But the Russian Jews that decide to do anything, really just maybe light candles or, you know, say, I won't eat pork or anything, that's a big victory. And a very, very, very few Russian Jews, in percentage wise, that say, you know what, forget those 70 years. I'm going back to my great Zadie. I'm going to go back to where he came from, and I'm going to live out his life. So Russian Jews are struggling, not struggling in the sense that we should have pity of other people, but struggling in the sense it's not so easy. And every commitment, every little step is a big fight. If you find a Russian Jew, I speak on behalf of all of us, you know, give us love and give us patience and understand where we're coming from. And it's a question if, you know, people that are observant today, if they were in an environment where we come from, if they would remain Jewish and how much mitzvahs they would keep 70 years later. But I want to go back to my story, and that is that my husband and I are trying to keep kosher even when we travel, which is very challenging. And we pre-ordered kosher food. And when we arrived and the boat started sailing, we realized that we were told that they forgot to order our food. So this was a little bit of an ordeal because this was an 11-day trip and we had no food. And soon enough, my husband comes back and says, well, there's another family here. They're a little bit older than us, and they also have no kosher food. Their last name is Cohen, and ours is Tamarkin. So we heard each other's last names quite a lot because, of this food situation. If it wouldn't be that food ordeal, we maybe not have heard each other's last names. So this is an important factor. So as we're figuring out what we're going to eat, the double wrapped salmon and hard boiled eggs in a new pot for the next 11 days and watch other people eat food. The woman from that couple, Kim, she and I started talking, what are we going to eat? How we're going to manage this? How we're going to light Shabbat candles? What time is Shabbat in Greenland when it doesn't get dark? I investigated all that before I went. And she kept on saying to me, I feel like I know your name. I feel like I know your name. And I was very honored and privileged, but I do write a lot. And many people have heard my name. So I said, maybe you read some of my articles or heard me speak. I speak here and there and, in different places. And, she's like, no, I just feel like I really know your name. So, I was very polite about that. And we were figuring out what to do about, those Jewish ideas about keeping kosher. And then the next day I went to the gym and I was on a treadmill and there was a woman in between us who miraculously turned out to be Israeli. And there was Kim pedaling away on a stationary bike. And as she's pedaling away, she suddenly says to me, Sofiya, I finally figured out how I know you. And I was so happy. And I said, how, Kim? And we're talking kind of in between that woman, we're not next to each other. She said, did you ever take Rabbi Niven's class? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, did you like the class? I said, yes, I've learned a lot, but you won't believe it, Kim. My biggest lesson from Rabbi Niven's profound lessons are not, bitachon and your yud and your tikkun and, your life plan of priorities, your LL plan. I said, it's about a very random woman that I will never in my life know, who heard my pain through a telephone, who'd never acknowledged herself. She took time, she took whatever money, she bought the car, she got my address, and she sent me a gift that would uplift me even for a little bit during this darkness. And I will never even be able to say thank you. And she's just pedaling away and she's, Sofiya, it was me. Exactly. That's exactly my reaction. I had to use the emergency stop on that treadmill because I now realize what the emergency stop is for. And mind you, to find someone whose name was not mentioned on the card, not even in her place of residence, which is Atlanta, not in my place of residence, which is Philadelphia, not in a place where Jews go, such as Florida or Jerusalem, not even places where people travel to, such as London or Paris, but on a cruise in Greenland where people just don't go so much. I don't know if Kim is on the line. I've invited her to come. We became lifelong friends. I don't know if she's on or not. She said she'll try to be, but eventually she'll hear the recording. And I would like to point out that, acts of kindness and acts of recognition that someone needs a little bit of light, and taking this moment, not necessarily to even send a gift or give money, but to give a listening ear, a smile, an acknowledgement. You matter. Your pain is heard. You are important. You're not alone. That changes a person. That helps them to go through dark tunnels without with hope that you're not going to drown. You're not going to be engulfed by this darkness. There will be the other end and you will come out. And Kim was that for me. And I never in my life would imagine that I would meet this woman, this holy woman in my eyes. And the beginning of this is that she was my teacher. She taught me about how to give. she gave me an opportunity to see a real hashgacha practice in my life, divine providence, where the chances of me ever meeting Kim and saying thank you to her were almost zero. It was almost impossible, in my humble opinion. I'm not a big statistician, but to meet in Greenland, people are writing such nice things. I just can't read them all. I apologize. Hopefully, I'll read them later. And I appreciate all the light you're sharing. But giving a little bit out of your life, giving your own spark to ignite the soul of another is unimaginably important. And I do want to tell you the end of this story is that because the woman in between us was a Jewish Israeli woman, she saw this whole thing come through. Kim got out of her bike and she came up to me and she showed me my home address on her phone. And my husband also came in. We were all bawling from tears. I still have not written about it. You're probably one of the first people that I'm, sharing this through this media. I did share it in a few synagogues as doing a standing before the live audience. But now that we're doing this internationally, it is a very personal story. I'm sure you can understand. And this woman that was in between us, Karen, was so moved by this, and something lit up in her own soul, and she will listen to this as well. And I thank her for that. She did not stay idle and watch this and say, oh, it's their miracle. You know what? It's every miracle that happens, every hashgacha practice, every spark that is shared and recognized is for all of us, right? Everything that we see is for us to do something about it. Everything we hear is important. We're listening to each other today. And I'm honored that you're listening to me now. That means there's something to learn from this, not because I'm important, but because Hashem brought you to this moment. And I'm learning from you and you're learning from me. And this is how Hashem runs this world, I humbly say, based on everything that I learned. And she told a lot of people on the ship. And as I joke that since, we're far from civilization, Kim and I became local celebrities for the lack of other celebrities on Greenland cruise. And there were a few hundred people there, maybe 400, something like 400. I don't know, maybe 200 people. I'm sorry. I'm emotional, so I forgot. So I think it was actually under 200 people. It was a small ship. And many, many, many people learned about this story because there's not so many people. And people started coming up to Kim and I and sharing their own miraculous stories, and Jews and non-Jews. And it turned out, believe it or not, that half of the ship was Jews. A lot of people were Jews. I mean, I don't know exactly how many, but a lot. And they would never, ever, ever suddenly start talking about them being Jewish or sharing their hashgacha practice stories of how light touched their lives, or how they also saw godliness in their lives, and how, there was a gentleman there, also a very, very special person. And we all became, very friendly. And Shabbat came a day later, and people started coming up to us as if we know better, and asking us, when do we light Shabbat candles? Not you, when do we light? And when are we going to celebrate Shabbat? And some people haven't celebrated for decades. And now that they saw the light and they saw miraculous, they wanted to be part of it, because light is contagious, right? If virus is contagious, if negativity can, hold the planet, I'm sure light can do millions times more to all of us, right? And Shabbat, I didn't have enough candles for all the people that wanted to light, even though being on the other side of this, where I realized people are lighting candles, I also wanted to light candles. So I would ask people for candles, and then I started bringing my own. And then I started bringing more for people that would say, oh, I'm also Jewish. Can I light with you? Or I would offer people to light, as Chabad does. And I would, bring more, but I wouldn't bring off more for the entire ship. So we kind of did our best lighting candles, and miraculously there was a kosher wine on a very limited wine list. There was a wine from I think it was from Austria. No one knew how it got to the ship, but we could make Kiddush. And it was mind blowing because everybody wanted to hear Kiddush. And everybody wanted to wash on the little, tiny challahs I brought with me. And then I brought a box of matzah for the second Shabbat. And everybody wanted to be part of it. And nonstop people talked about their life experience with Judaism, or miraculous, or connection to God, to recognizing their soul, doing good for others, receiving good from others, the importance of giving light and collecting those sparks and giving out those sparks generously. And we did have one stop in between Shabbos in a big city, which is really not so big, called Nuuk. It's a capital of Greenland. And there was one mall, and there's one store that sold tea lights. And every one of those women that needed light went and bought enough for everybody. So we came back to the ship buying the entire supply of tea lights of Greenland. And every woman would come up to me and say, look, I have enough light for everybody. And everybody had enough light for everybody. So we had enough light to burn down the ship. But that's another story. And we were able to light properly the second Shabbat. And there was so much light. And then everybody wanted to eat together. And all the Jews said, let's sit together and eat together. Let's celebrate our identity. We are part of the Jewish people. Let's just do this together. And I can't even tell you that this whole thing started by 4 years prior, me saying something to the group of Jewish women that I'm in pain. And Kim caught this. She caught my pain. And she said, let me send out this little spark of light into this woman's life. She never asked for recognition. She didn't put her name on the envelope. She just gave unconditionally. And this action ignited all these incredible behaviors of people that have not celebrated or connected to their heritage. There was a gentleman that sat next to me after we did Kiddush the second Shabbat. He celebrated, last time he did anything Jewish was in 1968. And I'm born in 1976. So this was quite some time ago. And I keep in touch with many of the people from the ship. We exchange numbers. And they're telling me that this was a highlight of their journey. And obviously, we all went to see the beautiful glaciers, the beautiful nature, the icebergs, and we did. But somehow this ice was melted away in our souls by the light that we shared. And many of them continue to light candles in their own homes, sharing this story. And what I would like to, I don't want to end, but I guess we at some point we have to end because of the time limitation. But what I'd like to encourage all of us, starting with myself, is that, people come from complex circumstances. We all come from difficult places. We all have dark days and very sad moments. And you could do very little and it would mean so much. And the impact of light is unfathomable. There's a beautiful saying that says that you can count seeds in each apple, but you can never count how many apples will come from each seed. And the seed of light, the spark that you plant in this world, leaves behind a trace that is unimaginable. So share those Shabbat candles with other people. Share your smile. Share the gift that you can, either as of time or a card. Help out. Listen to people. And send them Shabbat Shalom messages. I'm a girl on a mission. I spend my Thursdays sending Shabbat Shalom messages. Through Shabbat Shalom messages, people feel like they belong to something greater than themselves. There's a day called Shabbat, Sabbath. And it's a day that is theirs. Even they may not acknowledge it, they may not celebrate it. But I have people tell me, you have not sent me Shabbat Shalom. Does it mean I'm not Jewish anymore? Am I not part of the people that matter? And I would explain to them, I just didn't get a chance yet because now it's summer and Shabbat comes later. So I still have about 4 hours to do that. In the winter, I do it on Thursday because I don't have time on Friday. So such things as Shabbat Shalom messages, you matter, you're important, you're part of our people. I'm not the same without you. These types of behaviors, they transform the world. They help not only the person you help, but they help yourself. And we can only change the world by changing ourselves. And boy, does that change ourselves when we do kindness. So I thank you for listening. And I dedicate this class to all the acts of kindness that have been done by our holy people, especially starting October 7th. How many prayers of Tehillim have been said? How many groups were formed? how many words of wisdoms and kindness have been shared amongst our people. We are definitely one incredible, powerful, unmatched nation. And I'm so honored to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Sofiya, just before people unmute themselves to ask you questions, just before I open it up, I have to say just a few things. First of all, what you taught us, we're a group of women that have been listening to shiurim for years and years and years. Most people here do massive amounts of learning, et cetera, through all different types of things. What you taught us today through your words is something that is tangibly, I don't know how to put it into the proper words, but it's something that's so profoundly tangible, so profoundly. I want to use the word profoundly in so many different ways, profoundly deep into what it means. And I want to point out a few things. First of all, one of the things that you taught me in listening to this is to have the compassion to understand something that I never really thought about. You basically pointed out how Russian Jews, that the limitations of Russian Jews came from a system of such limitation and such oppression and suppression that we, as people who have been free and who've been allowed to serve in every way that we possibly can, right, can never understand. And I want to tell you that a tzaddik once said to me, it's so interesting, that if you can never judge someone, because if you were in their shoes, you'd be worse than them. And if they were in your shoes, they'd be better than you. And that's exactly what you said when you talked about, but it gave me such a aha moment of, wait a minute, like how we have to look at somebody even in a deeper, more compassionate, more secheldik way of where that person's coming from. It's unbelievable. I never looked at something in that way as much as I've learned in the way that you presented it. So I want to thank you, number one, for that. Number two, I want to thank you for something else. You also gave us the gift of Hashgachas Pratit in this group right now. You basically showed us how a deed that was done completely Mesiras Nefesh from a place of being anonymous without needing anything back, of how somebody reached out to you, how that one deed, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu took that seed, as if you explained in the analogy that you gave with that apple, which was gorgeous, how Hashem took that seed and what came out of that seed, the bracha and the light and the amount of people that got touched by that one act is unbelievable, is actually unbelievable. And it almost gives everybody else the impetus to work that much harder. And I just have to tell you, just your words about kindness and love and light and the way we have to see each other and how and what we need to do, all comes from this place that I talk about all the time of healing. If we would all have healed hearts, and if we would all not come from this place, if we would all have more of our neshamas revealed, and we would be able to expand this light of Hashem that is so great and so huge, what we can bring to this world. But I have to tell you that it was unbelievable. I don't know what to say to you. I'm so moved by today.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Hashem should bless you. And it's like probably all the Mesiras Nefesh. Hashem's really shown you how much he loves you too. How much he loves you through all the difficulties that you went through and everything that you've experienced. And he's shown you how much he loves you. And what what vessel he has used through you to bring so much of his light into the world. So I got to thank you so much for this. It was unbelievable and incredible. I can just cry from, and you also, I just want to tell you something else. You know, we all go through difficult times. You know, there's everybody. And you know what? No matter how much emunah and betachin you have and everything else, you know, you have moments. You know, you have those moments. I was somewhere last night. I said to, you know, I was talking about somebody in my family, and I was saying, you know, you have those moments of strength, and you have those moments that you just fall, that you just go into that feeling of despair. And you like, it's so unbelievable to listen to this, because it lifts you. It just gives you that chizuk and that lift back up again. So I have to thank you on so many levels. Really, this was so spectacular. I know I'm going on and on and on. I just can't say enough. I just can't say enough. And I just bless you that you should continue to go around and pick up those beautiful sparks that Hashem gave you, the one of the avodas in your life of picking up those sparks and bringing light into other people's lives. And yeah, so
I'm sorry.
So
I'm almost not sorry you're crying, because I think I will cry a bit as well myself. It's a very humbling experience to be on a receiving side of Hashgacha practice, and I think that you know, you don't get such firework Hashgacha practice experience often. Almost statistically impossible, but we get little ones. We get little fireworks daily, literally hourly, if you pay attention. And maybe it's a good idea to have a journal to recognize that, to share. It's a mitzvah to recognize it and to share it, not to waste it, as it allows us. It allows us to see that we're not alone, even when we're going through a difficult time.
Right. I'm going to open it up because we've been on for so long. Mazal, go ahead, Mazal. Ask what you want to. Mazal, I see your hands up.
Thank you so much. It was so beautiful. I was in tears, and you did remind me of bringing back that compassion and understanding. I'm actually from Uzbekistan. My family left in the 70s, and recently I was given my genealogy, and this was my grandfather. He was already disconnected from Judaism, as you know, very little. But I looked at the rest of the grandparents, and they were very holy people. And since I was,
can you tell us? Can you, Mazal, point out who everybody was? Who was everybody?
So this is my grandfather, Alav Shalom, Bechor. He was because his father was imprisoned when he was 6 years old. He was sent, he left school, and he was working and supporting his mom with the other children. So he never learned Judaism. He didn't learn how to read and write, but he was the financier of the family. And this was his mother. I actually met them in Israel, both of them. I met them in Israel. They were in Tel Aviv. And these were her parents. And he was a rabbi, and this was his wife. They were very people, and they kept Judaism and matzah, the communal. They made matzah. So they were very, very special people. And I've always struggled with this generation, the next one afterwards. Like, how can they be so disconnected? And
now you know.
And the way you're explaining it reminded me of what they had to do to survive, because they were really taught. My mom went to a Russian school, a communist school, and she was taught not to connect to Judaism so much. But because they moved to Israel, they put us in yeshiva. They made sure we go back to our roots. And Baruch Hashem, I pray every single day that our children, and we have this amazing opportunity that Hashem gives us to grab. And it's our choice to grab this opportunity to go back to our roots. And that's so amazing, and how you're doing that so publicly and such a large scale. And I appreciate that. And Bezrat Hashem, may we be able to take those sparks, like you said, that are lost. We don't know why Hashem, put that break, disconnected us for that time period, but he really is giving us this opportunity right now with all the classes that you're teaching, with all these beautiful teachers like Sofiya, to be able to take that opportunity in a healthier way.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mazal. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to take one more person, and then we're going to finish off with the tefillah for the soldiers. I see somebody else who's unmuted themselves. I can't see your name. It only says NA.
I am unmuted. I'm also from Russia, and I'm lucky.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Nana. I'm from Georgia Republic. Now I live in New York. And Sofiya is, I am blessed to have Sofiya as my friend, and I'm lucky recipient of her weekly nails. We share so much. I have the same background. My great-grandparents from father's and mother's side were rabbis. My great-grandparents were holy people, as I know now, my parents were telling me. My grandmother used to keep Shabbat, but would not impose it to us. Now I realize she was keeping Shabbat. Back then, we were used to, she does some weird things like old people do. She was always covered. She always kept Shabbat. Now I realize how meticulous she was doing it. But my generation, had we stayed there, would be totally assimilated. I remember Pesach like Sofiya. I also remember somebody from Shul was doing the special wax candles for the Hanukkah. It was special candles we used for Hanukkah. That I remember. Matzah was baked on the Shul premises. And all I think it's common for all Soviet Jews. We all remember Pesach because it was something unusual. We ate matzah, and for 8 days, we didn't eat any dairy products because there was no kosher for Passover dairy. And all 8 days was a meat, potato, and chicken, meat, potato, chicken, and matzah. That kept my family strongly. Other holidays, I do remember vaguely. I think it was Tashlich, probably because my mother used to say, we have to bring some water, bring it. So we were collecting pots of water, bringing on the table. I assume it was back then. I remember vaguely at home, Purim, because my mother was bake something and we'll just sing around, and my father was come and put some gifts on it. I guess it was recollection of their childhood. But luckily I was in Georgia. We were not as scared was our Jewish identity, but it was still not very welcome. On Pesach, I remember everybody was saying, keep away from Jews, they kill people for taking blood for the Matzah, all kind of things. But there was no official pogroms in Georgia. They were lucky, but there was still anti-Semitism. My father had the same story. He grew up, my grandfather had a higher, even though they were all the war and they were robbed for every possessions, take their homes, people possessed them. My grandfather was very successful Torah learner, very successful conversion. He had a huge building in his possession. Soviet Union took everything and put all family restriction in one room over there, huge house, and give it to everybody else. So yes, my grandfather was in prison just because he wanted to practice Judaism. And my grandmother and my father at that time had to leave the school to support his family. And then he went back to school, learned, and became, he was always serious Jewish identity, but luckily Hashem was sending people who were not very, as politically corrupted. So, and he managed to become very successful scientist despite his Jewish background. He was head of the science, was a professor of the science, and now he's in, my father passed away. He is an encyclopedia in Georgia because of his works he did in neurophysiology. But when he came back here, my father realized, but still, regardless of what we kept, we were robbed from the Jews. So he wrote, he translated books in Georgia and wrote the Georgian language book about Hanukkah and Jewish life. So we realized, because there was no literature to Georgian language to people to learn. And I became back to Georgia, to my children. God puts us, Hashem puts us in mind that we had to put our children to yeshiva. And through kids, we grow. We start keeping Shabbat and we grow through them, and Baruch Hashem. And that journey led me to meet Sofiya. And Sofiya, I'm so grateful. All her articles, I really encourage to read. Share same stories, but Sofiya such an eloquently describes what I was sharing. It's like such a very powerful, beautiful voice of all Soviet jewelry Sofiya is representing. And he from the very mundane, events of life, she brings such a big spark. Sophia, I'm so grateful for that.
I'm so grateful to see you here, and you represent a generation of people that return. It's even more challenging.
I grew up brainwashed, that's for sure. All summer,
brainwashed would be the right.
Yeah,
but you know what it is. You know what it is. Also, you really gave us the opportunity to really appreciate. I'm serious, like to really, even though we're all connected as a Jewish nation, when we see this and we hear this, you're actually giving us the opportunity to really see inside the life of other Jews, and to really appreciate. I don't think that I'm ever going to look at Soviet Jews again and Russian Jews in ever the same way again because of today. And I think everybody who's been on this call, I know a lot of people have gotten off because it's really getting late. We do have to get off. But I cannot begin to tell you the appreciation, what the gift that you have given us today. Such a gift. Much. You just don't understand, really, such a gift of insight and understanding and getting rid of our ignorance and allowing us to be more accepting and more understanding and everything you said, and the two of you really, it's really something, and I can't thank you enough. And tomorrow, Sophia, I'm going to ask you to come back again, Bezrat Hashem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's getting so late, but I can't thank you enough, really.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It was so gorgeous, and continue to shine your light and to bring hope and so much bracha to so many people. Thank you so much.
Thank
We're
you.
going to finish off.
Is it possible that you could share your phone number with us? It was an amazing.
So Sarah, I will share whatever, Sophia. I will speak to Sophia and share.
I'm happy to give an email that is very easy to remember. It's howdoigrow@hotmail.com. howdoigrow@hotmail.com. And I do get all the emails and I do reply.
Okay, amazing. Okay, let's just finish off with the tefillas for